We are here today in the Israeli Embassy in London to interview Israel's Deputy Israeli Foreign Minister, Tzipi Hotovely. Tzipi, welcome to the Middle East Report, and I just want to say on behalf of our channel, on behalf of the Middle East Report, it's an absolute pleasure and an honour to have the opportunity to interview you today.
The same here. I'm very happy to be here and speak to you about Israel.
And firstly, I've seen quite a few of your interviews on YouTube, the ones you've done with the BBC and youre, and I just want to say it's so refreshing to see such a passionate spokeswoman on behalf of Israel, and I think you're doing an amazing job and you're a fantastic communicator. Can you tell us, firstly, how did you get involved in politics? And where does your passion come from in defending your nation and your people?
Well, first of all, I think I have maybe one of the most unique stories about how I got into politics, because I got it from television. I had a television show once a week, Channel 10 in Israel, and one day I got a phone call from one of the viewers. It happened to be the Prime Minister, Netanyahu. It was the head of the opposition those days, and he wanted to know me because I was, as you described, very passionate about views that were very similar to his. And we met and we discussed many issues that were on the Israeli agenda. And after 2 years of having conversations every once in a while, he invited me and offered me to join the Likud party. And he said, you can contribute to your people much more by being political activist than being in the academic world, because I was working on my PhD in law. And I think I'm very glad that I agreed to accept his offer. And political life are exciting, and Israel is an exciting country.
Very much so.
And I pretty much enjoyed this decision.
Yeah, it's not very often you're going to turn a Prime Minister down, is it?
Yes.
I have to ask you as well, what is it like knowing that you are representing the nation of Israel and that you are fulfilling the dreams and aspirations of your ancestors that dates back 1,000 years, that the Jewish people would return to Zion and to be re-established in your ancient homeland, and to think that you are Israel's Deputy Israeli Foreign Minister? What's it like to serve at that diplomatic level, at the highest level?
First of all, let me start from a personal experience. My grandparents and my parents are so proud because this was their dream for so many years. My parents came from the former Soviet Union. They opened the Iron Gate for many Jews to come and be in Israel. And for them, having a first generation born Israeli becoming a deputy foreign minister is a great pride, because I carry a message of 2,000 years, like just you said. And I think most of my ideology is coming from the house I grew up in, very Zionist family. The moment they could, just left to come to Israel because they really believe that this is the only place where the Jewish people can carry out the message to the world. And I think what's unique about Israel, I think every country has its national identity, and every country wants to bring some good things to the world. I think our identity is built on universal values. The idea that stands behind Israel, even starting from our first father, Abraham, in the Bible, is the idea that when you succeed, it's in order to have a success to all nations in the world. And I think this was also the founding fathers of Zionism. They also followed this idea of Israel being light to the world. And we're celebrating Hanukkah very soon, and I think that this is the holiday of lights. And the idea behind it, again, is you bring light to dark places by just doing positive things. And this is what Israel is doing today. You see that we bring technologies to the world, we bring innovation to the world, we build many solutions to the world's problems. So I think that this way is a modern way of fulfillment of the big and the great Jewish vision.
Absolutely, and Israel is a beacon of light in a very dark region. Tzipi, I have to ask you, how much does your faith in Hashem and your religious beliefs shape your politics?
Well, I came from a religious family and I got a religious education, and on my daily life I practice religious daily mitzvot, like we call it in Judaism. I think this is basically, I would say, a fundamental part of my life. I think that as opposed to many religions, the nationality and religion in Judaism are one. And this is why, for me, serving in the government is definitely part of fulfilling my national goals, I would say, as a religious person, as someone who's coming from the Jewish Orthodox stream. And for me, that's, I would say, the highest way to perform my religious values.
Amazing. And when it comes down to your role as the Deputy Israeli Foreign Minister, I'm curious, I'm sure a lot of our viewers would be curious as well. What does that role entail, and what is a day like in the life of Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister?
I think that it's based on two things. First, of course, is relationship with the world. I think that the most important and essential thing is the delegations we get from all over the world. I think maybe we're the first country in the world in the amount of people that are coming, I think, in a squeeze time. Since I am there, I think we got over 50 leaders from all around the world. We meet delegations that are coming all the way from China and India till delegations from Africa. Of course, traveling overseas is a very important thing in my job. And the second thing, I think, is to fight for the truth. We know that for the last few years, the main thing against Israel, the delegitimation is based on lies, is based on falsifying the history, rewriting the Jewish connection, trying to erase Jewish connection to the land of Israel, trying to Islamize the holy sites. And for me, as a Jew, the most important thing by our perspective is the fact that all religions can feel the freedom of religion in Jerusalem. And when an organization like UNESCO in the UN is making a decision that is a totally mocking history to really make a laugh out of something that is a common knowledge, the connection, deep connection between the Jewish people and its capital city for 3,000 years. I think the international community loses something. And I think that the supporters of Israel should go out and fight for the truth, for the very basic truth of the connection of 3,000 years between the Jewish people and Jerusalem, the capital city of the Jewish people.
And what would you say are the threats, the challenges and the opportunities facing Israel in 2017? Because we've got a load of historical anniversaries coming up. For example, the 100th anniversary of the signing of the Balfour Declaration, 50th anniversary of the liberation of Jerusalem and the Six-Day War in 1967, including the biblical heartland of Israel. It's also the 70th anniversary of the UN Partition Plan and the 120th anniversary of the First Zionist Congress in Basel in 1897.
Yes, it's a very happy year, and we're going to celebrate it. What we're doing in the Foreign Ministry actually is, first of all, putting Jerusalem in the center by two big things. First of all, I made a decision that all the presents we're going to give to the visitors will be from the city of David, which is the ancient archaeological beautiful site in the ancient city of Jerusalem, in order to show the historic roots of the Jewish people to Jerusalem. And the second thing I think will be a wonderful start with the world is removing the embassy, the American embassy, to Jerusalem. I think that will be an historic moment. I think that after 50 years, it will be probably the best present that Israel can receive from our great friend America.
Absolutely, I look forward to that day.
And hoping, of course, other countries will follow.
Absolutely, not to put a bit of pressure on Theresa May to move the British Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem would be fantastic. Also, you're here as an official state visit on behalf of the State of Israel. What are your impressions so far, and what is the state of relations between Britain and Israel?
Very strong. I think that the beautiful and impressive speech that Theresa May, the Prime Minister, made yesterday, it shows on both a very strong commitment to Israel, strong commitment to fighting anti-Semitism and BDS. I think the fact that the British Parliament and the British government are endorsing and are adopting the idea that anti-Semitism includes anti-Israelism, includes boycotting Israel, includes every activity that is trying to compare Jewish to Nazism or all those horrible things that are out there. I think that those are the things that are showing the strong commitment of the British government, and the fact it's a pioneer, like it used to be in the Balfour Declaration, by opening the international gate to the idea of a Zionist movement having a true homeland in Israel. I think that this is something that it's really important. And I also feel the warmth. It's really great to see the excitement when she speaks about Israel, the Prime Minister. I also feel that people are curious about how we make all those inventions and innovation in such a small country that's surrounded by enemies, and how we get this really amazing economic success. I think people are curious about it, and people are really eager to learn. So we're here opening our doors and really sharing our knowledge with whoever wants to share it with us.
The British people voted to leave the European Union in June of 2016. And in terms of Israel's innovation, what can Israel offer Britain in terms of new trade relations and trade deals, particularly since the Britain's no longer going to be part of the European Union?
First of all, of course, our bilateral relations are very strong on the economic side, of course. Britain is our second ally in economic trade, and I think that this is something that shows that we have so many interests in common when it comes to economic life. More and more British businessmen are interested in Israeli technologies, and I think Brexit is a great opportunity to check how we can develop more of the technology-based connection, because today it's more based on material. We have the medicines, and we have plastic and certain things of the very old industry. I think we should start building our trade also on the innovation world of Israel, and I think it's a great opportunity.
And in 2017, the British government will be celebrating this year the 100th anniversary of the signing of the Balfour Declaration, which paved the way for the formation or the re-establishment of the State of Israel that occurred on the 14th of May 1948. How would the Israeli Foreign Ministry be remembering and celebrating the Balfour Declaration?
First of all, there's going to be an official visit of my Prime Minister here in London at November 2017. I think that it puts a lot of importance to this visit. I think that our embassy is going to do a lot of events around it. And I think the fact there is a strong debate around it, the fact that the Palestinians took this very clear, simple thing, a wonderful thing that the British government did during the fact that Balfour was the foreign minister, and challenging that and asking Britain to apologize on that. It means something about our neighbor's narrative. It means that what they really care about is the existence of Israel, not about the borders. And for many of Israel's friends, it's very hard to believe, but every time they challenge the very basic idea of a Jewish state, it's easy for us to see what their real intentions are and why we don't see a peace process in the region, unfortunately. And I think that for whoever wants to help by reaching coexistence between Jews and Arabs, I think the most important thing is to start recognizing the right of the Jewish state to have their homeland because of the history of 3,000 years, like we were talking. I think that the Balfour Declaration is really a moment where a great British leader recognized the biblical roots of the Jewish people. He recognized his beliefs as a Christian, and he said that's the reason that this ancient people should go back to their homeland. Many people are trying to erase this ancient history. They're trying to modernize Israel. Israel is a great modern civilization that takes care about the future, but it has very deep roots in the past. So I think it's very important to have the whole picture when we think about the Balfour Declaration. It was a milestone of Zionism, but it's part of a bigger picture of 3,000 years of history.
Absolutely, and that really does sum up the nation of Israel today, that mixture of ancient and modern culture. Tzipi, we have to ask you, I mean, you're here, no doubt you would have met with your counterpart in the Foreign Office, the British Minister for the Middle East, and no doubt he would have asked you questions about the status of the peace process. What is the current state of the peace process, and why is those negotiations not moving forward?
My Prime Minister said everywhere in the last 8 years that he's a Prime Minister, I'm willing to negotiate on a direct talks whenever my Palestinian colleague Abu Mazen will come. And the truth is that for the last 5 years, we see totally different ambitions at the Palestinian side about what they want. They used to say they want to have their own state. They don't want that anymore. What they really want is to have internationalization of the conflict, giving the international forums to decide for Israel what is right and give the Palestinian presence without them taking any responsibility. This is something that it's impossible in reality, because no one can impose on Israel any kind of agreement when the other side is not even willing to sit and negotiate. So if you're asking me, as the young generation in Israeli politics, where you should put the emphasis in the international community efforts to promote peace and coexistence, I think it should be based on education, because what I'm really worried and concerned about is that the last wave of violence that we experienced in the Middle East, it was involved by many children. People that are 12, 11, 15 years old, boys that were supposed to be in school thinking about their future, are taking kitchen knives and stabbing Israeli children in their beds. I'm sorry to shock some of the audience, but this is reality in Israel for the last few years. And I'm saying that everyone that cares about human rights in the most basic way of taking care of human rights should think where this hatred is coming from. No Israeli is being educated on hatred on the other side. We are definitely educated to defend ourselves from our enemies, but they can be our neighbors and our friends, not just to be enemies, if they will be educated to accept the idea of Jewish neighbors living next to them. And I think for too many years we neglected the educational side. We were speaking about economic cooperation, we were speaking about separation, we were speaking about many words in the air that were supposed to give them the opportunity to flourish. But when Israel left Gaza in 2005 and we got all the way back to the international border of 1967, the result was a horrible terror organization that took over the Palestinian people from a democratic elections. So people should ask themselves, what can we learn from that? And I would say, if you don't put efforts in the infrastructure of ideology and education, you'll end up having the same Gaza in Judea and Samaria, and we don't want that to happen. So I think that the way the Middle East is at the moment, we need to take care about the young generation, about how they think, their mindset, to try to switch the hatred to understanding that we must live together, because there is no other destiny to Jews and Arabs in the region.
I mean, I completely agree with everything you're saying. But isn't there a problem when you're meeting with European diplomats, British diplomats, maybe people from the State Department, who view the conflict in the prism of the Israeli settlers being the major stumbling block to peace in the Middle East?
Yes, I'm
and
arguing.
You're a passionate supporter on behalf of the settlers.
Oh yes, I'm arguing about it. I'm always saying that you call us occupiers. We're not occupiers in our own land. Our connections to Judea and Samaria, our connections to Jerusalem, our connections to Bet El and Shechem and Shiloh, all those places that were mentioned in the Bible, are so rooted in our history. And this is where Israel really began. You can't speak about Tel Aviv as Israel if you don't recognize our ancient ties to Shiloh, Bet El, and Hebron, and Jerusalem. Those are the cities where all our founding fathers of the nation started to write the Jewish story. And I think that for them, it's very difficult to understand, because they lack formulas and they lack solutions, and they find it very hard to believe this is not about territory. But this is not about territory. This is about the very existential question, whether Israel should exist or not. And I think this is why most of the enemies of the BDS, they're not fighting for a Palestinian state. What they fight for is demonization and delegitimation of Israel, which means it's not a question of borders. So I find it difficult to explain them that this is not the settlements that are the problem, but I have good proofs, because the PLO was established in 1964, way before there was any settlement, so this is not the issue.
I also want to bring on some good news, and this is a very courageous decision made by Theresa May's government into spending £25 million to the Palestinian Authority over its funding of Palestinian prisoners who are terrorists, who have blood on their hands, also going to its education system to incite young Palestinian children with hatred and violence and the glorification of terrorism that we see sadly on Palestinian media and their education system. Do you welcome this move, and is this the key to really building a genuine peace in the Middle East between the Israelis and the Palestinians?
Well, first of all, I thank to the British government for actually answering to our request, because when I got into the foreign ministry and I realized that Abu Mazen, the leader of the Palestinians, has official funds in the Palestinian Authority of sponsoring the families of the terrorists and making glorification of those shaheeds, the people that are committing suicide in order to kill others, I thought that the international community must put condition on the humanitarian aid. And the very simple condition is, please make sure it goes to humanitarian aid. Don't put money that goes eventually to support terrorism. And I think the international community is just now realizing this horrible tragedy of the fact that $22 billion were put and invested in the Palestinian Authority, and the money didn't go for a good cause. Eventually it went for corruption and for terrorism. And this money is maybe the biggest program of humanitarian aid in the world per capita. This is about the amount of the Marshall Plan after the Second World War. So it's amazing how much the world put efforts in order to try to help the Palestinians, but it was really abused. It was misused. And I think that by requesting friends like Britain to stop, to monitor, to try to ask the Palestinians to stop having those funds to sponsor terrorism, I think it's a great way to have the international community influence about the Palestinian Authority stopping this horrible way of incitement and, of course, glorification of terrorism.
In your opinion, how will the new US administration and the newly elected President Trump improve Israel's diplomatic standing in the world, knowing there's such close friendship between Donald Trump and your Prime Minister, Bibi Netanyahu?
Well, first of all, there is a strong connection and a true friendship between the Trump administration in many ways, and of course Trump and Netanyahu met before and they had a very good talks. I think that it's still very soon to speak about the new diplomatic era because the Prime Minister didn't go to Washington yet, and I want to remind you that the elected president is not a president yet. So I think we should wait to January and February to the first international meetings between the two leaders. I think the Prime Minister is very concerned about the Iranian issue, and I think both leaders have a very strong motivation to remove the American embassy to Jerusalem. And I think if the message will be that Jerusalem will be recognized internationally as really the capital state of the Jewish people and the Jewish state, I think it will be a great step in the international arena about the whole framing of the issues that are on the table. I think that will be a great start.
And of course, this would also counter the horrendous UNESCO vote on Jerusalem that is denying the cultural, political and historic connection between the Jewish people and the Temple Mount and the Western Wall.
Yes.
The other question I'd like to ask you, because Israel faces many threats, many challenges, and many opportunities throughout the world. But in terms of our Christian viewers who are passionate about Israel, they love the Jewish people, they love Israel. They're always waving the Israeli flag at Israeli organised events. Do you have a message for them of encouragement and support of how they can stand more with Israel and the Jewish people in 2017? Oh
yes, I think that this is a very important year. This is a year where we're going to be challenged by really by the story, the big story of Israel. And I think that for you, it's people that really know the historic truth. They really believe that the Jewish people belong to the land of Israel. I think this is the time to stand up and speak the very basic truth. I think that you should be more involved in conferences. You should be in touch with here in Europe, all our embassies. I think we're going to create many events around it. I think you should come to Israel and to see those sites that we actually made alive, because there was nothing there when Israel came. There were not cities, not high-tech companies, all those beautiful things that Israel brought to the Middle East. I think that we should tell this story of revival, and of course to speak about what good it brings to the whole region. I think this is where you can help us.
And Tzipi, I just want to thank you so much for giving me the opportunity today to interview, and I think that Benjamin Netanyahu made a very smart move in appointing you as his Deputy Foreign Minister, because you are a tremendous spokeswoman on behalf of Israel. You speak passionately, you speak truth, and you speak truth to power, and that's important to communicate Israel's vital message of peace and security. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Thank you.